Crime Curious is a true crime podcast that takes an in-depth look into real cases through the lens of a trained investigator and former prosecutor turned judge.
If you are sensitive to expletives, anatomical descriptions, and accurate descriptions of crime scenes, this podcast may not be suitable for you.
Welcome to Crime Curious. I'm Charnell.
And I'm Megan.
And we are shaking our gree-gree. I have the raccoon bones.
I have the kangaroo sack.
Okay.
Hop, hop.
I said a hip hop. Sorry.
I'm going to have it in my head the
I
whole
know.
day.
That's when you said
Look what
it.
you just did.
I love that little grandma on The Wedding Singer.
She's so cute.
No. This is not what the case is about today, though. But
It's not about a little grandma?
It's not. Oh, well, no.
Okay.
I don't know why
I don't know. I don't even know what I'm bringing you today.
Because she does get older. I will.
People
guys,
do that.
I am
if they
going
live.
to tell you that I sat here and stared at this script and convinced myself that we had already recorded this episode.
Okay.
And I was looking for the audio file.
Yeah,
okay,
like, why
Megan,
haven't I played it?
Exactly. Like, I know we recorded this. Where's the audio file? I looked in all of our places. I'm like, we haven't released it to anybody. And I realized what happened was that when I was writing this, I was vividly picturing us recording this so much that it felt like a memory.
So what you're telling me is I am in your head all the time to the point where you can hear my banter as you're typing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think I have some of your banter written in here.
I do the same thing when I'm working on the case.
Your banter.
I write
Yes.
like Charnell or Nell before I say something that I know you're going to have a comment to.
Yes.
And it's pretty accurate.
And I think I did that with this one, and I think that's why it feels like I already recorded it.
Well,
but anyway.
We are one organism.
We are, sometimes. All right, so this is the case of Martha Rendell.
Definitely have not covered this, Charnel.
Okay, I'm so glad to hear that you...
I don't recall this name.
Because I would hate to do this a second time and then have listeners be like, are you guys at 223 episodes in? You really can't remember everything that you've covered?
No.
The answer is no.
And you might get a completely different case. If we were to pick an old one and redo it now, you may get something completely different. You never know what I'm going to come up with.
You know, y'all, give me your feedback on that concept because very soon I do want to start redoing the very beginning ones when our audio quality wasn't as good. So for new people, when they come in, if they start with episode 1, I don't want them to be like, well, this podcast is shitty.
It's terrible.
Right.
They're doing this in their mom's basement.
Yeah, for sure.
No offense to those of you that live in your mom's basement.
But it is 100% what it sounded
Correct.
like. It was the echo of mother's past that was happening in those cheapy microphones.
Yep.
So we've since upgraded. So I do want to redo those, and I'd like Megan perspective
yes,
on
you may.
them as well. So that's going to be in the near future. That's what I'm thinking. Okay, anyway, back to old Martha, which is why the grandma thing popped in my head, because for some reason...
Martha's a grandma name.
It is. In my generation, it's just a little bit older. Beautiful name, just little older.
Biblical name.
And this is a little bit, not a little bit, it is an older-timey case. Now, I know some listeners don't love an old-timey case.
But Megan does, and sometimes it's all about me.
That's right. And when I write stuff, sometimes I just know what you're going to love.
Okay.
And really, this is a case of a woman hanged in old-timey days, and she wasn't even being accused of being a witch.
I was just going to ask, is this a Salem case?
No,
Okay.
no.
What is our time frame here?
We're in the 1800s. We do go into the 1900s.
Okay,
though.
so late 1800s.
Yeah, so Martha Rendell, she was born August 10th, 1871, and this is actually an Australian case. She was born and raised in Adelaide.
Adelaide?
Yeah,
I think it's right.
I don't have a beautiful Australian accent.
Kangaroo sack Jason.
Yeah.
Let us know.
Let me know. I'm sure I butchered that. But so we're going to have to do some super sleuthing here to make a determination of if the courts got this one right or not.
Oh, you know I love to let you know that.
I know. That's why I picked it for Judge Megan. All right. She was born in 1871. We know that her childhood was probably not the cleanest, most sanitary of childhoods. Right. Like everybody back in 1871. They're just doing the best they can. But Martha, as a teen, was a black sheep of society, not just her family. She would have been deemed the black sheep of society.
She go into sex work?
From her early life. Yep. She left home early in life from the womanly ideals of her day. All right. So she left at the age of 16 in 1887. And she proceeded to take on lovers.
Yeah, because usually at 16, you're getting married off.
Yes.
Time to start getting babies out.
And she wasn't, so she just needed to use her womanly skills for survival. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so she took some lovers.
Well, it's what it says, and it doesn't say that she swapped, favors for monetary means. But if we read between the 1887 lines here... I'm going to say that's probably how she survived, and that's all right.
And did it list a career?
Well, after that, it did not.
In her teens?
No.
Then again, I think it's a fair assumption, and we'll just be wrong if we're wrong.
Plus, I have a little more evidence to support our theory.
I do love it when you give me hard evidence.
Well, she bears 3 illegitimate children.
Yep, that should do it.
So, she got multiple baby daddies. She was clearly born about 100 years too soon for that sort of thing.
She was.
So
there wasn't as much free love in 1870 as there was in 1970.
Right, exactly. So that's what I meant by society of the time would have deemed her the black sheep. All right. Now, she did find work in a well-to-do Perth residence as a domestic servant, but she was a domestic servant with the right to vote, which was granted to women in Western Australia in 1899.
Okay.
Fun fact.
I love it.
Trivia fact right there for you, Megan. I know you memorize that shit.
I will. I won't ever forget it now.
In Australia, when were women granted the right to vote? 1899.
I'm not going to be that good. I'd be like the late 1800s because I can't remember specific dates.
So...
Because this one time, this lady named Martha, who was a house servant at the time and had illegitimate children. That's what I'll remember. That's
how I know. But do you remember Martha?
Right.
She could vote.
Correct.
Yeah.
I'm super fun on trivia night.
Yeah.
They're like, thanks, Cliff Clavin. Can we move on now?
So it's kind of looking like Martha, she's going to be okay because she can vote. She's a domestic servant. She's supporting her illegitimate children. It's fine. It's fine, not fined.
I mean, however.
Did you ever watch that episode of Friends where Monica was so stuffed up that every time she said fine,
she
it
ended
came out
with
fined?
Yes, yeah, I remember it.
That's what I just reminded myself of. Anywho, we digress. Things get even a little bit more scandalous for old Martha because she meets a man.
A married man.
It's always a fucking married man.
It is.
Always. When you meet him, when you meet a man, just don't meet a man.
Right.
Because they are married. Every last one of them.
I'm going to need to know if you have a hall pass.
Right.
What kind? Yeah. From your wife.
Yep. Martha didn't ask for that. Instead, she just looked at old Thomas Morris in the eyes and what was probably a handlebar mustache and said, I am adoring you because it seems as though you bathe more than once a week. Maybe twice.
So they begin a love affair.
The music sounded, the champagne popped off, as did the zipper on Thomas's pants, apparently.
Oh my God, Charnell.
Because it was love at first sight.
I don't think they had zippers. They were all buttons.
Good catch.
Thank you.
Good catch. How dare I?
It's okay. It's okay. It was buttons.
I was not in the era.
The work you had to put in to unbutton a man's pants, you better hoped it was worth it by the time you got to the bottom of them buttons.
However, my theory of Thomas's pants becoming unbuttoned that easy is a lot easier with a button than it would be a zipper.
I mean, there's less chance for injury.
Yes. Yes, there is. Zippers bite.
They do. I mean, I don't know that, but some guy told me about it once. And I've seen the movie.
Right. Oh, yes. It is in a movie.
Ben Stiller.
It's not a porn.
No,
so you know.
No, not unless Ben Stiller does porn, which you.
Oh, I'm going to say maybe in his early years. I'm just
kidding.
No,
thanks.
We're not starting rumors
not
here.
Not interested.
No. That's a hard no. No pun intended.
Yeah, it is.
So here Thomas and Martha, they start themselves a whirlwind romance. And I'm not sure when it came up in conversation. Okay. But old Thomas is, as you predicted, married. Do you want to take a guess on how many kids he has spit out? Well, his wife has spit out on account of him.
6.
Oh, she's so close.
7?
Keep going.
Dude, 10?
9.
9.
Yes, Megan. 9.
Oh, his poor wife.
So here Martha is falling in love with handlebar mustache. And I'm going to say he didn't lead with, hey, when she said, what's your number? I'm sure he didn't say 9.
Right. I have 9 children and a wife at home.
Yeah, no. He was probably like, I am free range, baby. Here's the other thing.
There's another thing.
Well, Thomas and his wife that has bore 9 of his children to him, ungrateful swine, they can't get a divorce because it's basically illegal at this time.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, there was a public meeting in Perth in 1901 where speakers were opposing a proposed federal divorce bill. Oh. Now, the people that were opposing it were staunchly reasserted Christian, people that were saying that Christian marriage is the foundation of the state and the welfare of its citizens, and their happiness and prosperity lies solely on a marriage contract.
The Bible didn't even say that.
Sure didn't. The Bible did not promise that marriage would be a happy
No, it gave you ways out even.
Thing.
Interesting.
Uh-huh.
So she knew, Handlebar Mustache's wife knew about the affairs?
I do not know if she...
But we at least know that he was
in
like...
In the beginning.
There's no way out.
We'll get to it that she most certainly finds out.
Okay.
But in the beginning, I do not know. I'm suspecting old Martha was probably not the first lady's skirt he had seen up.
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so. I would be surprised if he didn't have more than 9 kids running around. These were just the legitimate ones.
That's a good point. These were the ones born through the marriage.
Right.
Yeah. Good call. The reason that Perth was so opposing to allowing divorce is because if they made divorce possible and easier, it would open up the floodgates to adultery and orphaned children, and that the state must protect the family, punish severely all transgressions, and assist the injured.
Okay.
Yeah. So divorce is off the table. Because although the times are becoming a little bit more progressive, we're kind of starting to understand that maybe we shouldn't force people that don't want to stay together to be together because maybe it doesn't lead to happiness and prosperity.
No, because then they find other ways out.
Right. But I found it ironic that they were like, if you make divorce easier, then this is going to open up the floodgates to adultery and orphan children. Hello. They're still doing those things.
Yep.
It's not stopping those things.
No, they're just staying married because they can't have a piece of paper that says they're not.
Exactly. So they're just on paper married but living in separate households.
This is how it ended up that men just ran off for a pack of cigarettes and never showed back up at home. Mm-hmm. That's how.
Yeah. So the only realistic alternative to a divorce was de facto living. That's what it was called.
So you could legally live apart.
You could. It was in secret, though, since the arrangement was universally condemned as immoral.
It's immoral to not
it's immoral.
live together?
It's immoral to be de facto.
Okay.
So if you're going to live de facto, that means that you tell all your neighbors that these children do, in fact, belong to you and that you are married.
You just don't come here to sleep.
No. You picking up what I'm putting down?
I am.
You can live de facto.
Okay.
As long as you're still pretending to be one big happy freaking family.
Nobody pay attention to the fact that I'm going to leave here at midnight. I'm going to sneak back in at 6 a.m. the next day.
No. Living de facto means like he can move out and live with his mistress. He can take his kids with him, but you just tell everybody that mistress is the wife.
Oh my God.
And the mother of these babies.
Okay.
That's how you live.
But what about
de
your
facto.
other wife?
Well,
how does she explain to the neighbors where the kids
that daddy's gone?
And he took the kids.
Right. Some of them.
Sometimes, if they decide to take the kids.
Right. It all has to be decided upon, with them in de facto living. Well, I think that with his, scandalous ass, you just tell people, we're de facto. He defected.
He's out.
He defected on me.
He went out for the pack.
Yeah.
Didn't come back.
Right. So it's a sin to divorce, and who are we to go against the Sky Daddy's word?
The
so
Sky
here
Daddy's
we are.
word. It was not Sky Daddy's word. That was government.
Agreed.
That was government interpreting.
I'm a very spiritual person.
I know
agree.
you are.
I
I'm just saying these are, again, I'm from the government. I'm here to help.
And let me interpret God's word for you.
We can always make it worse.
Always. Martha and Thomas want to be together. The only way they can do it is for Thomas to go de facto, which he does. All right.
Oh, that must be love.
Yep. And so this is our way of keeping up with the old timey Joneses.
Okay. It's juicy though.
I
bet it didn't happen a lot.
Yeah, I know. I do. It does.
I really don't.
Hold on, though. It does make me wonder how many times it did happen, and how many times have last names been changed that shouldn't have been, right? That weren't like legally on paper. If you think about it, like all of Martha's kids could have potentially absorbed Thomas's last name as Morris, but they're not really a Morris. But we can't tell anybody. I think our whole lineage is just made up.
I have nothing to say.
I know, mind blown. None of us
kind
really
of
are.
Maybe that's just in Australia.
I bet it isn't.
Do you even know your last name, Kangaroo Sack Jason?
Do you? Is it your real last name that we see on Facebook? It might not be.
It might not be.
So in April of 1906, after nearly 10 years of waiting, Martha finally achieves her long-awaited dream when Thomas Morris, his marriage breaks down, and the couple separates, and Thomas goes de facto.
They were together for 10 years before he did that, though?
Yes. I have to think that Mrs. Morris probably knew, but she was probably like, well, at least he's staying off me because I'm only having 9 of his babies.
That's right.
I mean, if I was in her position.
Find a different hill to climb. Yeah. Mustache.
Right. Thomas Morris was granted custody of his 5 youngest children.
Weird. I don't like it.
I think I know why.
Okay.
This is just theory. This is not fact that I found. But I believe that it was because it would be easier, because he knew he was leaving his wife for Martha. And so it would be easier for him to convince the younger children that Martha is mommy, because they are instructed to call Martha mommy. And it would be easier to live de facto without society knowing, with the younger kids. And frankly, since they had 9 kids, some of the kids might have even been old enough. They were already out, married on their own and whatnot.
They haven't caused any childhood trauma with any of this.
Oh, I'm certain none.
I'm sure all of these kids will grow up just fine with no mommy issues at all.
I'm sure to this day, none of their ancestors are still holding on to any of that negative energy that came up during this time.
I'm not loving what you're telling me so far in this story, and we haven't even got to any murder.
No. So just wait. All right. So the lovers set up
Sometimes
a home.
After a long, stressful day at work, I like to come to podcast with Charnell so she can stress me the fuck out more.
Right. Exactly. I know. We have such a loving relationship.
We do.
We really do.
We do. Make me stressed, baby. Make me need a Xanax.
Yeah, what do you got for me? On a scale of gummy to Xanax, where are we at, Charnell?
All right.
I know. They moved to a rundown cottage in East Perth where nobody knew their name. This is not like the Cheers bar.
Okay.
No one knew Thomas Morris and Martha, anything. Okay.
It's our second Cheers reference during this podcast so far. I Cliff Clavened
You're
myself
right.
earlier.
You did. Oh.
I put it in your head.
You did.
Please continue.
You know what, though? That I literally wrote that down in my notes. That's like I knew.
I feel you.
What was going to happen. Oh, our synergy. It's amazing. Is it like listening to us make love every time you guys listen to this podcast?
It's our voices, right? If only you could see what we were doing.
We're one person, it's like our vibes are making love. And everyone just shut us off. So for the 3 of you that are still listening.
All men.
Yeah. It was easy for them with their, 5 little hatchlings in tow. Now, here's what's interesting. Martha, at this time, when she can finally get the love of her life, she leaves her 3 children.
With whom?
She abandons them just to people.
Well, because how would you explain it?
Right. I could not find if this was family, if this was any sort of barbaric foster system, friends of the family, I'm not sure.
She probably dropped them off at an old-timey orphanage.
It literally
like
said
Peter
she
Pan.
abandoned them. So they're not, her 3 illegitimate children are not coming with her. So yes, no trauma has happened in this case yet, right, Megan?
I just like how we trade off kids. These
I
are your
know.
new kids. They're going to call you mommy.
Yep.
And you need to get rid of your old
and
kids.
you need to get rid of your other ones. I know.
Okay. So
I
they're
know.
abandoned.
This was a delusional time.
I see.
I think. Yep. They do. They live like this. And it's not long before there are some issues. You know, the older kids of the 5 don't love calling Martha mommy. But
I don't know. It's bothering me. And they know they have a mom. It's not like there's visitation. Like he gets custody. Do they get to see their other mom?
We get to that.
Okay.
Because I wondered that too. So I went digging for that.
But
they just live like this. And we're in a time where private family things like this happen behind closed doors. You asked me earlier if this happened a lot. In this particular time in society and in the place in the world in Australia, there had been many upheavals in marriages and separations because of the gold rushes.
Okay.
And so many had undetermined amount of marriages. The gold rush and leaving to become a minor, not only did it create widows, but it also just created enough separation that they found other lovers.
A whole new
both
family.
Of them. Yes.
It's a long way to travel, so they just never come back home.
Yeah.
I'm married with kids at home, but I went and traveled this way, and I'm
now-
just not
and
going to go
now-
back there.
right,
I'm going to
and-
get a new family.
And now I have kids here too. It wasn't so abnormal, but it's still scandalous and immoral. In Perth, de facto couples were able to play out the semblance of respectability, safe from prying friends and family back home, and because they were cloaked in city life, right? In being a nobody in the city life. So Perth is a good place for them. So
Small fish, big pond.
Right. Martha Rendell's new home of East Perth was an ideal place, being peopled with, as this was described, peopled with transients and battlers who took little interest in their neighbors' doings. It's a rough neighborhood, in other words. So they don't give a shit if daddy comes home with a new mommy and has 5 kids in tow. We keep
Overnight.
to ourselves. Yep, we keep to ourselves. And outwardly, they looked like a regular husband and wife with 5 kids, and they were able to pull this off for 3 years. After 3 years, Thomas's wife comes back into the children's lives after the older 4 children had aged out of the home.
Right,
And
so she's an empty nester now, and
Yep.
she wants her babies.
So she moved just a few blocks away from the happy couple.
Can I tell you how much I love that?
I do too. Honey, I'm home. Just a few doors down.
I mean, it can't be comfortable.
No.
Well, I need to tell you that my ex moved in 3 houses down.
Right.
She doesn't have the kids anymore, and she wants them back.
She sure does.
And she's going to ruin our picture here that we painted.
She certainly does, because now the townspeople, they know the truth that Thomas and Martha are naughty little piggies.
They're de factos.
They sure are. So picture it. I'm sure shade is being thrown, but life went on. Okay. In the little East Perth cottage until April 1907, the 4 youngest children, Olive, Annie, George, and Arthur, were between the ages of 5 and 14. And in April 1907, they actually had diphtheria during a citywide epidemic.
Okay.
All right. The demands on Martha for nursing 4 children were exaggerated by the terrible rasping sounds that was coming out of her, because she was also really sick as well. All of the children also had this struggle to breathe, life-threatening danger, really. But this is not unusual for diphtheria. There is this throat membrane that goes throughout the whole body, and it poisons you and makes you breathe and sound like that, all right? The other thing is that there's a family doctor, James Cuthbert, visited regularly and commended Martha for her devotion in nursing the children to recovery at the expense of her own health.
Sure.
This is very contagious. She did get sick too. Sickness seemed to have taken a hold on the family, and soon 9-year-old Annie was back in bed with convulsions, vomiting, and diarrhea, for which the doctor administered the diphtheria antitoxin and prescribed tinctures of laudanum to ease her pain.
I think that was the very beginning of the advent of the DTaP vaccine, which is your diphtheria. Is it tetanus or tuberculosis and pertussis?
Yep, exactly. Yep. Now, here's the thing. Annie, tragically, and she was 9, tragically dies in a delirium on July 28th, 1907. Now, the illnesses began at April. She died in July. All right. And this was a citywide epidemic. It wasn't just this family.
So there were losses.
Yep. The cause of death given by Dr. Cuthbert was epilepsy and cardiac weakness.
The cardiac weakness makes sense for the time, but epilepsy?
I wondered that too, because of the convulsions. That's all I could think of.
Oh, they may have considered all seizures epilepsy.
I imagine.
Different than our current diagnosis.
Because
but where was pertussis in there? Like, don't you feel like that should have been a cause of death, or even like a secondary? They may not
diphtheria?
have done secondary. Yeah, I didn't mean pertussis. I
was
meant
like,
diphtheria.
shit, I don't know. Did she have pertussis?
No. Yes, I was channeling it. It was no diphtheria.
She originally got sick in April when diphtheria was going through the city.
Okay.
And then she was put back in bed. Like, she got sick again with convulsions, vomiting, and diarrhea. And so that's why, because some time had passed, why they went with epilepsy and cardiac weakness, but most certainly could have still been stemming from the diphtheria that she had back in April, as that toxin can stay in your body. In August, just when life seemed to be returning back to normal, now this was July 28th that Annie died, Olive, George, and Arthur were diagnosed with typhoid fever.
Now they have typhoid. Is this also epidemic at this point?
It's 1907.
They just pick an epidemic whenever it came through the city in a wave.
It's all bad.
Fair.
Not sanitized. And they live in a very poor, rough area.
Okay.
Yeah. This time, Olive did not recover, and suffering from vomiting, diarrhea, and an undiagnosed membranous condition of the throat, she died October 16th, 1907.
These kids are being poisoned, Charnell.
Well, this undiagnosed membranous condition of the throat still could be the diphtheria.
These kids are being poisoned, Charnell.
So, according to her death certificate, she died from a hemorrhage and typhoid.
Okay.
Because they all did get typhoid. They were diagnosed with it. So, once again...
Forgive me for not completely trusting early 1900 autopsies.
Oh.
Just throwing that out there.
Do you feel like the science may have been off? That's odd.
I feel like there was a lot more guessing that happened then.
Right. Yeah. And taken as scientific fact. Sure. Yes. Sure. Once again, the local Methodist church members joined in mourning the family's loss. Now, I will tell you, this all is coming at a time when health officials were promising mothers no more infant deaths, okay? Because they're as a society, in an uproar about the evidence of essentially... like, you're lucky if you make it out of your first year of life. Okay. And so health officials are like, we're going to make pregnancy better and deliveries.
Infant mortality.
Yes. Deliveries better, all of this stuff. They know also what's coming through from health officials is evidence of population decline, evidence of extreme poor health of their citizens. There's racial degeneration, moral deviance, all of that stuff. And it's all attributed to the rapid social change and urbanization of this time.
More people are flocking to the big cities where it gets dirtier, you have more disease, you have higher death rates, infant mortality, and your population declines. Yep. All makes sense.
It does. And they're also having, progressivists coming forward saying, okay, we need to do some urban planning, some public health, some housing, education, and care of children in the home.
I'm digging those people.
Right. But I'm setting the backdrop so that you understand that this is all happening at this same time, where we know that disease is an issue, and we know that humans being in close contact with one another is increasing the death rate and the spread of disease and is the issue. And yet here we are. In Perth, the leading exponent, so the leading doctor, was Dr. John Cumpston, appointed from Melbourne in 1907 as a medical officer with the Central Board of Health in Western Australia. All right, Dr. John Cumpston, Cumpston.
Got it.
In this role, he addressed school children's health, pulmonary disease amongst young people, epidemiological studies, tuberculosis, diphtheria, quarantine, diet, housing, eugenics, literally everything. So these tragic events of Martha were played out against the backdrop of shocking disclosures of infant deaths in the Mitchell baby farming case that basically
baby farming?
Mm-hmm. That galvanized Perth in early 1907 and shone a glaring spotlight on issues of surrogate, childcare, and immorality.
Oh, baby farming.
Yes.
Well, that's a terrible name for surrogacy.
Baby farming provided a service for working single mothers and deserted wives forced to leave babies and small children in care while they earned money to survive.
They were selling babies, giving them up for adoption
Yes.
to people who could not have them.
Yep. Stories were rife of neglectful conditions, cruelty, and abuse in these premises. Reports alleged that 37 children had died at the Perth home run by Mrs. Alice Mitchell. Despite the requirement for inspections by the Board of Health and the fact of regular visits by local doctors who regularly signed death certificates but raised no concerns with the board, the presiding justice, his name was Macmillan, exonerated any of the blame on the doctor who recklessly signed numerous death certificates. Okay, saying that it wasn't, essentially saying that the doctor shouldn't be the one held accountable, even though he was the one that was constantly going in and signing death certificates in these places and never reporting the child deaths in these baby farming communities. Okay.
Well, because that'd be a terrible stat for your infant mortality rates.
It really would. It really would. And so Mrs. Mitchell was sentenced to 5 years hard labor in the women's division prison. And so I tell you this because this is all what happens to Martha is all happening at the same time that this Mitchell case is playing out in court.
Okay.
All right.
And probably pretty popularly followed.
Yeah.
Through newspapers
Absolutely,
at the time.
Because it's like, oh my gosh, there's a baby farm and oh my gosh, there's abuse and there's death happening of small children at these places. And it was just it was a lot for society at the time to take. At the same time that health officials are like, we have to have more the spread of disease is happening because we need to have more sanitary conditions, right? I mention that because the mention of the illegitimate children in the Mitchell case draws attention to issues of immorality in Perth. So women that, of course, get the blunt of the blame. Condemnation, surveillance of reproductive controls through contraception and abortion escalated. Even women's readings choices were attacked. In 1907, the Western Australian newspaper alleged that popular romantic novels were corrupting women's morals.
Oh, for Christ's sakes. I believe it.
Yeah. Yep.
I believe it. Look at what happens after you read 50 Shades.
Right.
You're going to go off and
gosh,
bang your husband.
Sure can. Can you believe it? And also use sex toys.
Oh, my God, no. And you might get tied up a little, but only consensually.
How corrupt is that?
Okay. So we must monitor these weak constitutions of females in society in order to stop baby farms.
Yes. The solution,
I'm sorry. I just made
the solution to the infant mortality rate and the unsanitary conditions and the health crisis is that we should take away women's rights to reproduction, essentially.
And to read.
Women's rights for anything, because a man has nothing to do with how babies come into this world. Don't you know we do it all through our mind on our own?
Okay.
If only we could.
Right? It'd be less painful.
It really would. So
this is I have a very good picture of the climate of the time then that these events are occurring.
I did also find too that a ruffian
Ruffian is one of my favorite words in the whole world.
I love ruffian, but this is a ruffian Children's Protective Society, so like CPS, was formed in 1906 by well-intended middle-class women to help families in crisis and to protect children from cruelty by interviewing parents, inspecting their homes, and then removing young ones to the care of foster mothers. Just middle-class women band together over tea one day.
Society.
Yes.
Said, we don't care what the government says.
No.
We're taking your babies.
We're walking in here.
They were kidnapping.
They sure were. Under a society, guys. Yes.
Okay.
They were interviewing parents, inspecting their homes. They were doing my job.
It's like private agencies.
Yes.
No, I'm kidding.
So
I
crazy.
love some of our private agencies, but I'm not kidding because it's kind of what they are. They made their own.
But this answers the question of it had to start somewhere.
Right.
It started with nosy middle class women. That is how it started.
The Karen Club.
The Karens got together and didn't like the
I don't
look
like how
of
you're
Martha's
raising
home.
these children.
Right.
We're going to take them now.
Yes. I'm going to interview these people and I'm going to twist whatever they said into my own liking. And I'm going to give these babies to foster mothers who are probably mothers who struggle with reproduction of their own and want.
So they started their own baby farm.
Yes.
This could have been a situation where some kids were actually saved.
Yeah.
It also could have been a really corrupt institution, but mostly I'm just intrigued of what urban housewives can accomplish when they all get together with the same mindset.
Yep. And they didn't even have any liquor involved that I'm aware of.
That we know of.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So here we are. Just to, I really wanted to set that scene for you. Many women new to Perth were struggling to reestablish their families, often in the face of financial problems and difficult marriages. In contrast to the other states, Western Australia was experiencing a baby boom, yet mothers were forced to basically bear even more children to build upon the nation because it's being spread that the population decline is so significant that they could possibly all die off. Mothers are also faced with growing interference in their maternal role in the home, as the progressivist doctors insisted that they be trained in scientific standards of child rearing, hygiene, and efficiency.
Oh.
Yep. We're coming after the mamas. And you need to be scientifically trained on how to rear your children, how to be hygienic about it, and how to be most efficient because we need you to repopulate this state.
Cleanly. You're going to need
Yep.
to pull your breeding permit. Do I feel like I'm reading a weird dystopian sci-fi? I've read this sci-fi novel.
Yeah, that is true. I
have. This is just some weird, attempted utopia that's going horribly wrong.
Yep.
Pretty soon the babies will be growing in plastic things up in the room, and you'll drive through and I'm going to take a number 8 and a number 40.
Well, I'm telling you, we tried the glove on here in this society, and it didn't work real well,
okay.
Megan. It really didn't. So Martha's happily ever after with Thomas Morris probably didn't feel like everything that he had promised her, I'm sure. They lived in a rundown cottage. They were in poverty. And, of course, the daily grind of housework and then being solely in charge of the 5 resentful children. Now, the little
2 of whom have died.
Well, right. I'm just painting the whole picture all together.
Yeah,
before they even die. The girls are a little too young for chores, and the big boys were outside doing jobs and going to school. So it all fell on Martha.
Right.
Then tragedy starts brewing essentially for the Morris children in June 1908. So they had 2 die in 1907, July and October of 1907. June 1908, Arthur was suffering from the same symptoms of vomiting, diarrhea, and that mysterious throat membrane as Olive, and he dies in October. So just 12 months after Olive. 1 year later, Arthur dies. Now, on this occasion, doctors become suspicious and they conduct a partial autopsy, and Martha insisted on being present for the autopsy. They were seeking evidence of irritant poisons in the throat.
Yep.
But halfway through, Martha stops the procedure. She later testified that she did this because she really felt like they had seen enough.
Oh, sorry, Doc. You've seen enough?
You've seen enough. This was used against her at her trial. It was being interpreted as a deliberate act to prevent discovery of Arthur's murder, but at the time, the doctors did agree to take no further action and did say that they had seen enough and listed an ulcer of the bowels, a hemorrhage, and cardiac failure as the cause of death. They agreed with her. She was like, I think you've seen enough.
But
and they're
what
like,
caused
yep,
the
we
ulcer,
have.
Doc?
We've seen enough.
Okay.
So they did not make a report concerning the unusual situation where 3 grown children, I mean, we use the word grown, but they're not babies. Because at the time in Perth, doctors are basically telling the mothers that if you get your child through the first year of its life, you're golden.
Right.
You're fine. Here we have these 3 children that are all well over the age of 1, and they're dying all within a space of 15 months of one another. 7 months of quiet follows Arthur's death.
Who's next?
And in May 1909, Martha, her life begins to slide pretty out of control. And this is why. Because this is when the Morris's mama moves back into town.
And 3 of her children have died.
Which is why she moved back into town.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I just didn't tell you that in the beginning.
This makes sense.
Yes. She comes to say, what up, bitches?
Why are my babies dead?
Exactly. What is going on?
And there's 2 left.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know what's happening.
Yep. The younger son, George, runs away to live with his mother.
Good job, George. Mm-hmm. Safety first, buddy.
Now, Thomas didn't know that he had ran away to his mom's house. So he calls the police. So the police get a hold of George. And this is where the world starts to unravel for Martha.
They find out about the de facto marriage.
Well,
the police do.
They learn about the de facto marriage, but also George tells them that his stepmother had murdered his brother Arthur, and that Arthur had told him she was painting his throat with spirits of salt, also known as hydrochloric acid.
Oh my God.
George complained that she had also served him bitter cups of tea that sent him fleeing to his mom's home in fear of his life. He claimed that his father was her accomplice and informed the police of the couple's immoral relationship and web of lies. Now, George is 13 at this point in time.
Damn near an adult man.
Yeah. With her secrets exposed to the world, Martha Rendell retreated into a shocked silence that she broke only once during the investigation in statements from her prison cell proclaiming her innocence. Meanwhile, the public is going crazy because we got ourselves a mama murderer.
Right.
And that just does not happen.
Especially during these times that you're trying to prevent these wicked women in their ways.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that you use the word wicked because truly in the newspaper, it was like they created her persona as being the wicked stepmother from a fairy tale. Truly.
She kind of is.
Everyone immediately believes that the boys' claims are true. All right. And I'm not saying they're not.
I guess I kind of jumped to that conclusion too, since I was going poison earlier.
Right. If you look up the name Martha Rendell, you will read short synopsis that she killed Arthur and is suspected of killing Olive and Annie. But they don't ever take into consideration anything else, like that the inquiry was hampered by the period of time that had elapsed since the deaths, and because doctors could not say what effect swabbing with spirits of salts would have, suspicions were further aroused when it was shown that Martha Rendell had purchased large quantities of spirits of salts during the time of the children's illnesses, but none since the last death. Armed with this information, the detectives obtained permission to exhume the bodies, and this was done July 3rd, 1909. So police exhumed the bodies of the 3 children, and diluted hydrochloric acid was found on the throat tissue. Here's the catch, though. This was a very common prescription prescribed for diphtheria and typhoid at the time.
I was just going to ask if she accidentally killed them.
Well,
because this was a common
Here's the thing. Every
medication.
time that those kids got sick, she called in the doctor. And the same doctor that is like the head of all these health warnings and whatnot had given her prescriptions like this, like just as he would his other patients, to put this spirit of, what was I calling
Spirit
it?
of salt.
Yes, the spirit of salt and all that stuff. All of those things. And it's never brought up later at the trial as like, could it be that she gave him too much and you guys just don't really know the right dosage given weight and all of that stuff? It's never brought up.
Or long-term use of hydrochloric acid on moist membranes,
Right.
and the fact that they found an ulcer on one of the kids and they may not
time.
have known that happened.
Correct.
Ooh,
No,
this is interesting.
They're not putting any of that stuff together. The doctor is literally testifying that, yes, these are the prescriptions that I gave her. And yes, we know that she bought large amounts of hydrochloric acid.
But she didn't attempt to hide it, and it was only during times of illness. And
she had not bought any since the start of the kids' illnesses.
Just
like everybody else had been doing of the time.
Who's our little fellow that ran off back home to mom?
George.
Had George been ill recently in that she was starting to use the salts on his throat again?
George had, yes, she gave him tea and it tasted bitter and it freaked him out. And he had not been sick. He had just known about Arthur. Arthur had told him before he died in October.
Arthur thought he was being murdered.
Yes. Arthur scared George, in other words, based on the treatment that was not uncommon for the time and was prescribed by the doctor.
But it's killing him.
Illness.
He's like knowing as he's being treated for his illness that she's killing him. Yep. He's relaying this message to her brother who's like, new mom's a murderer.
Yeah.
And she could possibly be sitting over here going, I'm not a murderer. That's what you're supposed to do.
Right. Which is exactly where she is sitting.
Even though it's killing you.
But also, let's talk about the fact that George is 13, that he was taken away from his mother. We talked earlier about that childhood trauma. He doesn't love living with Martha and not getting to live with his mom.
I get it.
Right? And so you pair that with the fact that Arthur told him that she was painting the back of his throat. Then all of a sudden she serves him a cup of bitter tea and he starts to feel like, oh my God, this is starting to happen to me. So that's why he runs away to his mom.
Yep.
Yeah. This, like I said, this never comes up at her trial in terms of the fact that it's a very common prescription described for diphtheria and typhoid, which the doctor had diagnosed them with as their illnesses, not the cause of death, but their illnesses that started their trajectory to death. All right. Then a neighbor comes forward and said that he often peeked into the windows and saw Martha in front of a screaming child putting something down their throat. Also, I imagine when a child is sick, it's probably not easy to get something to coat the back of their throat with anything.
Especially when it's acid and it hurts.
Yeah, exactly. And you already feel like shit. I took that as like, yeah, that probably did happen.
No,
but does that mean maliciousness?
No, this is concerning because I think all of those things are true, but we have to get to the mens rea of Martha. What was her intent?
Right, exactly. I will say this too. Okay, I found it in a couple of citations that the neighbor also made claims that she seemed to be like rocking back and forth and pleasuring herself.
Oh no, I don't want that at all, Charnell.
It was on Wikipedia, which I'm skeptical of anyway. But then I'm just like, I don't know. It almost sounded like the guy was saying when he peeked into the windows, sometimes he kind of saw her rocking back and forth. Like, was she kind of going crazy?
I mean, was she significantly ill?
She was at some points in time watching, because she got diagnosed with diphtheria as well. It just made me wonder. I just found it on that one. Was she
treating herself with acid?
And having a trip?
Well, no. Was it hydrochloric acid?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
I mean, if she's treating, to me, that would go a lot to intent. If they're sick and she's treating the children with this, she should be treating herself with this as well when she's ill. And if she's not, that could go to some type of malice.
I do not know if she.
I bet no one knows.
Yes.
Because she went silent, and you stated basically made one statement or something during her incarceration.
Yes, and she had said, yeah, exactly, that this is what I was told to do. This is what I was doing. She didn't try to hide it at all.
Nope.
I found that I'm just kind of leaving it out because I think that it just kind of some words from an observer got perverted over time. So there it is. But when the news hits, because of the fact that she's poor, living in sin, essentially, de facto, with a married man at the time, when essentially the rich of the time are starting to form some kind of child protective services, the doctors are starting to educate and require women of the household to raise children in more sanitary conditions. Martha went through a huge public trial before she was ever tried officially in court.
Oh, yeah. And don't worry, the elite moms always have the lower class in their heart.
At the
heart.
center of their heart.
Yeah. Oh, we know better than the trust tale as old as time.
Exactly. Yep. Then there's harsh prejudices about stepmothers that had survived for centuries, regardless of their vital role in caring for motherless children.
Yeah,
right?
because the story of Cinderella has existed around that time in terms of, I think, Hans Christian Andersen, and it was a much uglier, scarier tale.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So the other
The slipper
thing,
was fur, by the way. See? Useless information.
it was fur.
It was. Yep. It was a fur slipper. Lost in translation to glass. You all love me. I love you too. Please continue.
And this concludes our segment of useless trivia facts that Megan knows on Crime Curious. Now back to our regular scheduled programming. I do enjoy your random facts.
I can't help it.
But
it's
I do remember I had heard that. So here's the thing. The doctors of Perth are above suspicion. Because remember, I had already told you about the Mitchell case when they were exonerated by the judge, even though they were writing all those death certificates. So the doctors are never a part of
and this
questioning
precedes
her.
Civil medical malpractice.
Right.
They may not have had criminal intent with any of this either. They were committing malpractice.
Yep. Oh, goodness. I just yawned. I'm so sorry.
Boring you?
No, it's
okay.
just, I don't know. That was I've never yawned on air before.
I'm
odd.
not even presenting you with a story.
I'm just, something needed to come out there. Martha, is that you?
Is that you? It might be.
It might. Honey, hold on. I'm trying to tell your story. Then they have, during the trial, so we've talked about how she was, the medical treatment, all of that stuff. They don't call any witnesses in terms of like the legal, the doctors, okay, to say what's going on. They also had some really weird sign, as you mentioned earlier, Megan, of I just don't trust that, sometimes their science was a lot of guessing.
Yes.
Well, that kind of happened here too, because their forensic analysis did not produce any evidence of poisoning with hydrochloric acid, nor did they know of its use in any other murder cases. They can't say.
So can you commit murder by poisoning someone with a substance that there's no proof poisons people and kills them?
And has never been used in any other murder cases.
This is not a great case for the prosecution so far.
And this is what the prosecution is saying, is that this is what she did.
Yes.
Yep. To explain their prosecution's inability to replicate the children's symptoms in experiments where they swabbed the throats of rabbits and guinea pigs with the acid, they resorted to preposterous explanations of Martha Rendell's superhuman criminal capabilities to deceive. In other words, she's a woman, so she's deceptive.
Jesus,
she is beyond.
Hang the witch.
Yes, because truly...
Oh my God.
We swabbed the back of rabbits and guinea pigs with this acid. It did not produce the same results of what happened with the kids. And again, remember, diphtheria, what we talked about at the beginning, there is like this mucus that coats the body when you're sick with it. Yeah. So this whole thing. The defense had just one day in court devoted to the couple's defense. Because remember, Thomas is on trial too because George made allegations against him too. George said that Dad was her accomplice.
Okay.
All right. They had no witnesses to speak on their behalf. And of course, because of the way they were living de facto, it was shameful. So they're both facing charges of willful murder, which carried a mandatory death sentence. Thomas Morris was saved from the noose by the court's inability, in other words, to distinguish like if his son was really telling the truth or not. So essentially, they were saying that his son would lie about their own father, knowing the consequences and the court's gendered assumptions that Martha was the dominating perpetrator in the murders.
Well, she did lure him away from a marriage into a de facto, and we must blame the woman.
Yes, yep, exactly. And so they believe that the sons would lie about Thomas because of all of that, but not about Martha. What the fuck?
I have so many feelings right now.
Well, this is the other thing.
There's not enough evidence to convict either one of them.
Oh, no. But what saves Thomas is that his frequent absences working away from the home pointed the finger as Martha as the sole culprit. That is what they determined. Martha bore the brunt of the public prejudices and stereotypes, and Justice McMillan pronounced her a moral deformity to the all-male jury before a hostile, largely female audience then followed with, like, the female audience did not enjoy that judge said that about her. But he then, the all-male jury came back with a verdict of not guilty for Thomas Morris and a verdict of guilty with the death sentence for Martha Rendell.
I knew it.
And the jury didn't make any recommendation for mercy on her at all. It's just baffling to me. Like, I get that they know his he's showing up to work. He goes to work every day. He's not the one child rearing.
No, there wasn't enough evidence, but there wasn't for her either. No. And this is, in my opinion, based off of what you have presented me with, what you found, but she had already stood trial in the court of public opinion.
Yes.
This preceded any type of fair and impartial jury selection. Certainly either obviously preceded when women may have been able to vote, but could they serve as jurors yet?
No.
And if they could, they obviously weren't able to select any women to serve on the jury. So this preceded then. We don't have a fair and impartial finder effect.
No.
Period. Point
not
blank.
At all. And it just really bothered me that they came to the conclusion that Thomas's son would lie about him because they're upset that
chosen a new wife.
Yes, yep. But they wouldn't think that they could possibly lie about Martha too.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily blame the kid either, because he probably felt like he was being abused, and he may have been being neglected at the time. We know child abuse and neglect had become an issue, especially with the, I'm assuming, elite white rich women in the area.
Yes.
And so I don't want to discredit what he's reporting, but there's just no proof. There's just no evidence that she committed a murder.
No, because they couldn't even with their crummy scientific analysis, they couldn't even replicate it on guinea pigs.
Right. So you have this defense that has an uphill battle. They need to be able to have experts testify, really, that there's no way that this caused the death of the children. Right. There's no way to show it. There's no way to test the hypothesis. The tests that they have attempted have not come to fruition.
Right.
The animals haven't died.
No.
Or maybe even become ill.
Right.
And my client was following a common medical tactic that was used. She'd had prescriptions before. Put the doctors on the stand. Have them say, oh, yeah, well, I told her. But they were going to deny it, too, because doctors were kind of on, quote, unquote, trial at this point, too, right?
Well, right. Well, they had been exonerated in the Mitchell case.
They were, but there were concerns.
Yes. Yep. But they did not. I mean,
and they were just
all men
guessing.
As well.
They were guessing at medicine.
Well,
try this.
And during the autopsies, because they exhumed the children's bodies, and they did found small amounts of hydrochloric acid, which she was not denying. That's the only thing that she would say during the inquiry. Right. Like, this is how I was treating them because I was told to.
Right.
Right. And so then you have all these other things that lots of rampant disease going on at the time.
Oh, just to try it differently now, to find, 10 other women to come on the stand or men and say, oh yeah, this is how we were treating this also. This is what we were told by this doctor to do. And they just didn't know to do that stuff or have the resources to do it.
She had some sympathizers, not many.
I didn't think I was going to like this woman, Charnell, when we started off, but never in a million years should she have received this conviction.
No. And it had been 38 years since the last woman was hanged in Western Australia. And there was some heated debate on the issue of capital punishment in the lead up to her hanging, but few people really challenged the verdict. And Martha Rendell was hanged with haste, essentially, on October 6th, 1909, just 20 days after the guilty verdict was handed down.
We didn't have appellate rights in Australia at that point in time.
And it had only been 7 weeks from the investigation that George started. The son George, when he ran away to his mom.
This whole thing happened within 7 weeks.
7 weeks.
She got her speedy trial, but that doesn't always help when you have that much evidence or lack thereof.
Literally it had been 7 weeks from when George had been interviewed by the police to when they hanged her.
The culture and hysteria of the time surrounding women of loose morals and trying to save all the babies and increase population, she was made an example of.
She was. Yeah, she was the third woman to be hanged in Western Australia, the only one to be executed for child murder, and the only woman ever to be hanged in Fremantle prison. She has continued to be condemned in history and public memory throughout the years.
So people in Australia are not remembering this lady fondly. She's a child murderer to them.
Yeah. But we haven't, do you see how you have to put all the
evidence?
The whole context, the context of the time, yes, and from an evidentiary standpoint, how they're treating illness at this time, which is the whole backdrop of society.
Is there a book on this?
There's not. No.
I want to write one.
No, there is a Supreme Court file. So I was able to take a lot of stuff from hearing,
transcripts from way back then.
Yes.
As accurate as those could be.
Yes.
From the early 1900s.
And a lovely girl.
It was even preceding microfiche.
For sure. Yeah. Oh, microfiche. Yeah, I love that.
I just like saying it.
It's a wonderful word. There was also a really great article I made reference to. I mean, it's in the show notes, but Hannah Hybett did a good article on it called Revisiting the Trial of Martha Rendell. And she is actually where I got the information about the baby farming.
Yeah.
And kind of the backdrop of society at the time.
God, I'm so glad you did this.
I'm just like, okay, so hold on, because it gets you thinking about some of the ways that we treat illness and disease today. And just as a mom of 4, I'm like, holy shit, we just went through a pandemic, right?
Yes.
So what if we had been following medical experts' advice and then all of a sudden your kids die and you're accused of and I'm not saying, hell, I don't know, maybe life would have been easier for Martha if she had knocked off a couple of Thomas's kids, because it was probably a hard life.
Sure.
But I'm just saying that the evidence does not equal hanging in this situation. It did seem within 15 months apart. We have 3 children that are, 9. What were all their ages? I'm so sorry, because I don't even know that I said all of their ages. But they were more grown children.
They're adolescents. These are not infants that we're
11.
speaking of.
Right. And so, I do get why this was a problem.
Oh, yeah. She may have totally killed him, Charnell.
Maybe,
I just don't know what her intent is.
But I don't know that she I don't know that she really
Well, what
did.
history of, if any, do we have that there had been any complaints of abuse or neglect prior to illnesses and being treated for them?
None.
My God, it's is it early Munchausen's by proxy? And
right. And if you want to go by this theory, so it was Olive and Annie, the 2 younger girls first. They're the ones that she primarily really has to take care of because the older boys are doing chores and whatnot. And then it was Arthur. That's suspicious, right?
Sure.
But at the same token, the older boys aren't, maybe because they're doing chores, they're doing physical exercise more, they're fighting off the disease better. I mean, all of them got sick, certainly, but it's just these 3 that died in a span of 15 months. And I mean, I don't know, especially after going through COVID. I've read stories about COVID taking out whole families before, months apart from each other. So we can't say that it couldn't have been a disease at the time, right? So I just...
we've done all kinds of weird things to treat illnesses or children, over years.
Oh, yes.
I mean, I don't mean to offend
whiskey on a teething
Thank you.
baby.
I was just going to say, I don't mean to offend anybody who still insists that whiskey on a teething baby works. No, it doesn't. It doesn't work. I'm sorry. There's no scientific proof to it. other than you want to get your baby a little bit drunk through the membranes on their, so they'll stop crying for a minute.
And that's just
I stop crying when I take a shot of whiskey too, Charnell.
Me too, and as does my soul.
Right,
okay?
Exactly.
It makes life on earth just a little more tolerable.
You're right. Get out the Ambisol. Give them ice in a net so they don't choke.
Yeah, it really calms my baby down and mellows them out, and then they sleep for hours. Yes, honey. That's the alcohol. They passed out.
Correct.
Right. I, too, have experienced such a remedy.
Oh, God.
Yeah. So
Recently.
there it is. There's Martha Rendell.
You definitely have not presented this case.
Good.
It was old-timey, but it was a serious old-timey case, and I liked it.
And how many cases that are currently going on right now are going to be covered 100 years in the future by people?
They
and
might
they're just
be.
like, and Judge Megan got it so wrong. I'm just kidding.
Probably. And how did they not see this?
Right.
Yeah.
And the science of the time. And I have to keep that in perspective too. If I'm going to throw out the argument that, oh my gosh, how could they have not looked at society at the time? We also have to have that argument when we're looking at this and saying, look at the times.
Yeah.
It was so easy
Agreed.
to condemn a woman because right now women were under such scrutiny for being horrible mothers that were unsanitary, and they needed a whole regime to come in and show them how to raise their children.
Including taking away all their scandalous books. You may only read the Bible.
Yes, exactly.
King James Version.
And stop spreading your legs and becoming pregnant and, seducing all the innocent men in the world.
The innocent married men.
Yes, that's right. Right. The innocent married men. So that's that. And now are you ready for a brain bath?
Yes, please. You should bathe me.
Okay. This is from one of our Patreons, Amanda. And she actually emailed it. And the title of the email is How Charnell and Megan Sent Me to the ER.
No.
Yes.
This is true?
This is true.
Should I apologize before or after I hear this? Both?
Well, it's really not our fault. It is kind of
really
our fault.
It's really your fault, isn't it?
This is why I was recently talking to a Patreon about how I do try to take out if the dogs bark. I try to find them in the audio so that I can delete them. And she was like, oh, no, it's fine. No, this is why we do this.
Okay.
So she said, this is a funny story that you can use as a brain bath if you'd like. I really just had to share how you two lovely ladies sent me, a 30-year-old, to the ER. LOL. I was listening to the podcast in my headphones while giving my two 60-pound dogs a bath in my tub. Well, naturally, after they had a bath, I had to shower. I thought I paused the pod and turned off my headphones. So I started showering, my eyes closed, rinsing my hair, when for some reason my phone decided to connect to my son's new stupid-ass shower speaker. Out of nowhere, I hear Charnell and Megan's booming laughter blast into my shower. Naturally, my first thought was that I'm about to be murdered by some kind of crazy laughing serial killer.
It's us.
It is. I whip around, got soap in my eyes, slip on the shower curtain, and fall into my tub. I landed flat on my shoulder. After a profuse amount of cussing and severe pain, I can tell I dislocated my shoulder.
Oh my God.
Well, now I'm in an even more of a predicament because I'm a paramedic and hell will freeze over before I call my coworkers to help my naked ass out of this tub.
Word.
I sit in the tub for a good 5 minutes contemplating my life decisions. Ooh, been there.
Oh,
yes.
There.
Finally, I crawl out of the tub and I call my best friend to help me get dressed to go to the ER. After a strong dose of pain meds and a pop back into place, I'm good as new. There is a bright side to this story. My best friend found this whole situation hilarious and now is a new fan of Crime Curious.
Your misery is our blessing.
Yes. And she says, love you guys. P.S. Don't feel bad about the situation. I'm halfway convinced my teenage son set me up for this since he was recently grounded for missing curfew. But that is a case for another day. Keep it curious.
Love it. I'm so sorry you fell. And also, that would happen to me.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I may have said it before on the podcast, but I'm pretty convinced that if I accidentally die at home, it will be wrapped up in my shower curtain in the bathroom.
That is a really good bet. Statistically speaking, that is when we're at our most vulnerable
You're
and in
naked.
the most dangerous situation.
But when I'm naked in my bed, I'm in control. When I'm naked in the shower, there's
No.
so many variables.
There's ones that we just don't know about.
No,
the other day
absolutely.
I actually accidentally stepped on. I had forgot that my husband had got me one of those little scent things that you can kind of put in it in the, not directly in the stream, but you kind of set it off to the
Yes.
side.
It's
And
aromatherapy.
Aromatherapy, yes.
You can do the ones that are like for your cold too, that are like really kind of Vicks or
Yes.
menthol, eucalyptus, whatever. But I love them.
Yes, I've really been enjoying them. Well, I did have my eyes closed because I was washing my hair, and I stepped backwards onto one, and that little bunker was slippery. And I did have a brief panic moment of, this is it. You're going to slip backwards, hit your head, and this is how your family is going to find you.
Yes.
With really expensive shampoo in your hair, and that you didn't even get to wash out and have it do its job.
Yeah.
That's
Charnell.
the most tragic for me, is that the shampoo's so freaking expensive.
You're correct. I have
awful.
those brief thoughts that could be a potential death. The other one's probably going to be my high heels. I have got them.
Yeah.
I have stepped on things. In fact, going up onto the bench the other day, I was wearing a black robe that was a little bit longer than one I usually wear, and I was wearing very high heels, and I totally stepped on it and thought I was going to like fall face first. First of all, everybody would have loved it in the audience.
Absolutely.
Also, I'm not one who gets embarrassed, so I probably would have popped right up like a jack in the box. But could. But it's very small back there. I would put my head through the wall. I could have died, Charnell.
Absolutely.
I could have died.
And that is not the scene
Not really
you
how I
want
want
in the
it to
newspaper.
go out.
In the
No.
Daily News, we've got just a picture of your ass hanging out of the wall of your courtroom.
No.
Rest in peace, Judge Megan.
Thank
you. That's not how we want it to go down. There are plenty of times in my life where I'm doing something stupid. Just the other night, went to go change into my pajamas, realized that I left all the clothes in the dryer. Said pajamas were in dryer. So I go racing down my stairs. The boys were not home.
Right.
Racing down the stairs butt ass naked.
Yep.
And of course, had this brief moment of like, if you don't make it down these stairs, this is how they find you, at the bottom of your stairs.
Nude and mangled.
Sprawled. Yes. And it's just not,
oh my God,
not a
with Miss
look.
Kitty hanging out and everything.
Right. Not a good look. That's not how
And when
I
you
want
have
this
bigger
to
chests
happen.
like we do, you know you're not going to fall in a position where they look good. There's going to be one up
Never.
over your shoulder
Yes.
and one down to the side.
Yep.
It's not going to be a pretty picture.
It's not going
No
to be
wonder she
flattering.
didn't call if she's a paramedic or
Right.
an EMT.
No.
She's like, no.
No.
I've walked in on this situation before.
right.
None of y'all are seeing me like this.
Nope. And then I know what you say afterwards in the rig.
Oh, the pictures
No.
that you needed to have for evidence.
Right.
That now are in the locker room. Or on my going away cake when I finally quit this damn job.
Exactly. No. All right. Well, thank you all so much for hanging out with us today and for listening. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. And until next time,
Keep it curious.
keep listening.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.